Hi, King Den here. This video is called The Spirit of Family Fed. I remember seeing the spirit as a teenager, which I guess is a little unusual because people who live and grow up in a plantation of unity tend not to see the manure that they're surrounded by. You actually have to leave the spiritual farm in order to realize just how steeped in statism you actually are. Alright, so this video is based on a post that I posted on Facebook on August 5th, 2017. The quote goes, "If we recreate family fed in spirit, we will invariably recreate it in result." This post came at the heart of the time during the Jamal vs. Lourdes case when we were seeing the rise of basically the family-fed spirit within the sanctuary community, which was really disappointing to see, but that's history. So what was actually really fascinating is when I posted this, Jamal Johnson ended up just, I guess, out of spontaneity and just theological brilliance, started just coming up with the points that he could actually identify as being more specific to the nature and spirit of family fed. So this particular video is just going through a lot of the posts that he came up with. Beastly behavior. Before I begin, I just wanted to say, so these are the points directly from the Facebook kind of thread, and they're Jamal Johnson's words, not mine, but any commentary will be mine. And also, I went ahead, because I'm a slight grammar Nazi, and add some punctuation or capitalization, spacing corrections as I saw fit. It didn't change the spirit, but just full disclosure. 1. They take the decentralized name family fed, and federations are based on a creed or commonality, not dictators, and they turn it into a lip service only form of decentralization. One of the most tragic forms of spiritual bait and switch, they recreate the top-down system out of what should have been a decentralized system. When I see and read this, I actually think about Genesis 3, where Satan takes God's own words but turns it against God to the opposite of effect. It's the opposite spirit. So what they do is they change the words. They change the word faith, change the word relationship, change the word family fed, change the word federation in this case, to mean the exact opposite. So federations are decentralized by nature if it's an honest federation. But if you look at family fed, sure, there's local free-range human farming on a local level, but what are they doing? They're just being led to slaughter by headquarters, which is just being led to slaughter by Korea, and then ultimately the Whore of Babylon. A quick way to figure out how really the organization is structured, whether it's authoritarian or decentralized, is just to look at the legal connections between the organizations, or in a de facto sense, follow the money. What is the tithing vision? Is it a 2-tier pyramid, or is it a 5-tier pyramid? That's still the structure that you're looking at when you're talking about a federation or not. 2. They're populated with people who place careerism and a number of lesser valued things in life above the blessing. They do this by the inordinate amount of attention that is placed on an AA or lesser values. So work is what I think about here. You can think about it in family fed where you actually praise or you look up to people who choose to go to work for the church, either to be a pastor or a youth pastor or to work in headquarters. But to be a pastor, youth pastor, or to work for headquarters is actually putting yourself in an archangelic position. And it kind of devalues the whole purpose of the blessing when you think of your value and identity as being more work-oriented versus grace-oriented with the blessing. Keep in mind, it's the blessing that gives you lineage, and lineage is what the Son of God has and the archangel doesn't. So the archangel is going to be working, he's in the servant position, so careerism, work, duty, events, activities, that's all archangelic values understand. 3. They cannot remove fallen nature, so they constantly placed a central figure above the conscience, giving rise to a faulty conscience, an angelic conscience that sees obedience to a hierarchy as the right and proper thing to do. When I refer to the plantation of unity, this is it. So in the era of restoration, it's unity with a central figure and obedience to that central figure. However, that's a restoration era mindset. That's an old wineskin that I'm happy to see die. What I'd love to see have life is that individuals across the world just follow their own conscience in their own daily life. They don't have to follow a pastor. They don't have to follow the whore of Babylon. They don't even have to follow Father's direct successor. Because in your own life, you have a conscience. In your own life, you have a direct relationship with God because you are now a son or daughter of God. That's it. You don't have to follow hierarchies. You don't have to follow anything other than wherever you think God is leading you. 4. Showing love by accommodating evil. I think about free love when I think about this one. And with free love, it's true love plus the false love. It's the embracing of a relativistic type of love, or a love outside that of the principle. God cannot love Satan. God hated Cain. That's in the divine principle. So by actually accommodating evil, or by ignoring evil, you end up giving that evil a platform into your own community, whether it's social manipulation, sexual standards, power tripping, guilt tripping, what have you. That evil spirit ends up taking root in your community because you're not willing to root it out. 5. Guilting people into shows of love that necessarily accommodate evil. So by extending point 4, basically what this is the multiplication of evil. You yourself have chosen to ignore or accommodate evil in the name of love, which isn't really love, it's free love. Then what you do is you say, hey, so-and-so, you start manipulating another person or a group of people into doing the same decision that you yourself made, and that's called guilt tripping. 6. Placing an unwise amount of time on events. So no one's saying that events, activities, programs are invalid. You can't go through life without having these things. But is the subject a continual kind of stream of events looking toward the future as always being better and better and better, and it's like the next event will have victory, or the next blessing, God's kingdom will come, the next event, you end up realizing that the event itself is where people lose their sense of identity. Now, contrast that with a more principled approach where in your relationship with God, you have freedom. And with your freedom, you choose to follow your conscience or the Spirit or the Holy Spirit and to say, where do I place my time? I will choose to go to this event, or I will not go to this event because really it's all about family. So you may want to stay with your family and do kind of activities with your family. But the event itself is always secondary. But in a family-fed environment, it's always the focus versus just the supporting structure. 7. Hijacking the realm of the children. Family Fed was meant to be a decentralized realm for the children, tribal messiahs, but it got hijacked by control freaks who don't understand conscience-driven decentralization dynamics. Family Fed spirit doesn't ever trust God's children. When I think about this one, I think about the Garden of Eden was created for the children of God. However, it ended up becoming the place where they got spiritually raped. And so when you see this kind of continuation of the reversal of dominion and the multiplication of this spirit, you realize that the archangelic tendencies has a really big problem letting go of power. But, when I see this, it's actually the children of God's problem. They willingly give their power for whatever reason, that maybe the accommodation of love that we talked about earlier. But they allow the control freaks under the banner of unity or mission or something like that to end up controlling their own life versus actually living out their own life by choosing to leave that spiritual plantation. 8. Failing to fathom the real practical supremacy of the blessing as a value, failure to teach it, failure to raise the people up to the level of defeating Satan using the blessing. True Father called the blessing an inoculation against fall sickness. This is a particularly important one, and it has to do with the realm of absolute sex. So in absolute sex, the only difference between you and Satan is that you have lineage and Satan is a created being. Well, you're both created beings, but only you have lineage. So when you don't understand that lineage that comes through the blessing is the sole deciding factor, your ability to point to your parents who have the ability to point to true parents as being the source of your lineage and this sole power over defeating Satan. Think about Jesus on the cross, Jesus on the mount. Don't tempt the Son of Man, basically was his statement. 3 times he could defeat Satan without any physical weapon or show of force. He just had to say no to a fall in love type of lifestyle. So when you understand really what the blessing is about, it teaches you that your loin has everything to do with defeating Satan. It has nothing to do with trying to show power. So when you distract, Satan would love to distract Family Fed or any organization away from teaching you the only thing that gives you power over him. 9. Only True Father knows. The idea that we are not meant to individually understand, so we must only defer to True Father or his representative. It is the negation of the individual mind and conscience. When Family Fedders get proved wrong, they call you arrogant for daring to, quote, know more, end quote, because only True Father knows. When I see this one put in place, it often has something to do with don't judge, right? So Matthew 5:7 comes where you got to take the speck out of your own eye. But people don't realize they take that entire Matthew 7 passage out of context. Actually, you're supposed to know. Jesus died for you. Father gave up his family for you. You're supposed to be a co-heir with Christ. You have an original mind. You have a conscience. God gave everything and he wants you. He wants you to know. 10. Lack of elder sonship. No victory in seeing yourself as a child of true parents. No basis for sovereignty mindset among members. If you truly recognize yourself as a child of true parents, a child of God, then you realize that you are God's greatest creation. You're not going out to try to go do something else with it. You yourself is what God ultimately desires. So if you read the kind of the Chung Suk-Young and Father's words about elder sonship, there's a period where you actually have to transition to understand the heart of God. And then when you understand that, it's in that relationship where you have sovereignty. In a family-fed spiritual environment, you actually have no sovereignty because you don't even know who you are. You don't consider yourself a citizen of Chung-O-Guk, and you're constantly deferring any sense of what Father said was restored sovereignty into the future. It's next year, next, the blessing, next event, next generation. It doesn't matter. You're victorious when you realize who you are. 11. Meritocratic values over family identity values. And then they both are animated by the same values. They're both meritocratic in nature. They both place lineage of God in second position whenever they deliberate on issues where there is a clash. All right, so I have to admit I had to look up what meritocratic values actually were. But it's really simple. It just means that you're placing your value and your identity in the results. So you become really easy and quick to create a ends justifies the means environment. So in his subpoet, Uncle Jamal was talking about how quickly this nature is also in the sanctuary community. They both have these same values. They're forward thinking and results thinking, or event thinking, or external function thinking. Now, contrast this with a family or an absolute sex-based identity is, yeah, I'm happy to have quite a lot of results in my life. Actually, just on a personal level, I'm quite proud of the things that I've done. But my identity is not based in any of those relationships of results. It has to do with I'm the son of my parents, and I have amazing parents. They've taught me values and just how to live in their own life in a genuine, absolute sex environment. So when you're really looking at meritocratic values, you're really placing a system or a result over the individual and who has cosmic value. 12. Forcing the language of the movement to refer to itself as a church. So HSA was called a church. Family Fed is called a church. World Peace Unification Sanctuary is called a church. This one is particularly important because what it ends up exposing is a reversal of dominion of the religious archangel. So instead of thinking yourself as a citizen of Cheongguk and a child of God, and you choose to interact in the political arena or the business or religious arena where you resonate more with, you end up hijacking the entire movement and kind of shoving this religious kind of denominational avenue, and kind of that becomes the entirety of providence for those who think of it in those terms, which is really a kind of a more narrow-minded viewpoint of God's really expansive vision. Uncle Jamal's final point was, this language places the movement under the dominion of the angel because it's necessarily centralized and hierarchical. Understanding the spirit and whether you're dominated by the fallen archangel or not is kind of an important thing, because the spirit behind a situation and a group of people ends up affecting the downstream culture, which ends up affecting the downstream politics. So if you understand that logic, actually you're kind of wasting your time if you're just talking about politics, because politics is the result of a culture and the culture is the result of the spirit. Ideally, we want this to be a spirit going back to God and the Holy Spirit in our own life. Unfortunately, the family-fed spirit is clearly a reversal of dominion that just perpetrates this work-oriented, duty-oriented, kind of result-oriented atmosphere where an ends justifies the mean culture is the result. In conclusion, I encourage you not to trust my quote or any of these points, but to really kind of think about what is the archangelic values, and think about where the fight for sovereignty or where the fight of good or evil is. Is it in your own mind? Is it in your own family first, right? Is it in a fight in the heavenly realms first, or are we fighting some other organization outside of us? For me, when I read these points by Uncle Jamal, it's really easy for me to understand why Hyunjin called him theologically very deep. I know he had a 2-hour straw man rant, but still, this is very deep.